The southern German province of Bavaria boasts a wealth of magnificent old castles. In this one, Nymphenburg Castle in Munich, in the year 1845, one of Bavaria's most popular kings was born, Ludwig II. He came to be known as the fairy tale king and was most famous for the 3 royal castles he had built during his reign. Ludwig spent most of his childhood in a historic, romantic fortress near the town of Füssen, Neuschwanstein. The castle commands a fantastic view of the alpine foothills of the Allgäu region and the chain of bright blue lakes running through the mountain valleys. Ludwig learned to love this countryside, with the steep, majestic peaks of the Tyrolean Alps in the background. And it was here that Ludwig turned his first dream into reality. Deeply impressed by the legendary world of the medieval German sagas, inspired by Richard Wagner's music dramas, Lohengrin and Tannhäuser, he selected the historical territory at the edge of the Pölat Glen for the site of his recreated medieval castle, Neuschwanstein. The castle took from 1869 to 1886 to build. The interior of Neuschwanstein is dominated by themes from the German and Nordic sagas. In his early years in Hohenschwangau, Ludwig had first heard the tale of the Nibelungs. It supplied the theme for the wall fresco in the forecourt of the building. Wagner's influence here is undeniable. The spirits of Tannhäuser and Lohengrin can be found throughout Neuschwanstein. Here in the king's study, for example. And the Lohengrin theme is also dominant here in the parlor, which depicts the connection of the Swan Knights in Hohenschwangau Fortress with the legendary hero Lohengrin. Ludwig identified strongly with the figure of Lohengrin. The legend of the Holy Grail fascinated him. Throughout his life, Ludwig strove toward the ideal of absolute purity and deep religious faith, combined with supernatural power and strength. The adjoining dressing room is partly furnished with an elaborate, adorned washing table and a magnificent jewel chest. Portraits of the Minnesinger Walter von der Vogelweide and the shoemaker-poet Hans Sachs testify to Ludwig's deep love for the world of the Middle Ages. Ludwig's construction projects served as a source of great encouragement to the building crafts of his kingdom, and the high level of their creativity can be seen in such products as this luxuriously hand-carved furniture in the royal apartments. Ludwig's love for the people and places of his kingdom is stressed throughout the building. And some new elements appear here as well, in the throne room. Here we find the ceremonial splendor of Byzantine architectural styles interwoven with the concept of a temple of the Holy Grail. St. George, conqueror of the dragon. St. Michael, the victorious. The 12 apostles. Christ, Mary, and John the Baptist. And 6 sainted kings dominate the apse. Only the gold and ivory throne is missing. It was never commissioned. The focal point of Neuschwanstein Castle is the Hall of Song. Ludwig was inspired to create this hall on a visit to the Wartburg, site of Wagner's opera Tannhäuser, which had left a deep impression on his imagination. The ideal of romantic love put forth in that work helped shape his own ideas of a dream world, far distant from the chaos of the real world. For example, this magically illuminated artificial grotto, a recreation of the interior of the Hörselberg, or Mount of Venus, the scene of Tannhäuser's first act. But the motif of the Blue Grotto of Capri is touched on here as well. Ludwig helped achieve his artistic designs through the use of the then brand new technology of electricity. A painting of the Venus scene completes this romantic setting. This Venus grotto can be found in the gardens of Linderhof Castle. Linderhof is in the Grasvang Valley. Here, Ludwig sought to construct a new Versailles, in keeping with his second ideal after the Middle Ages, the absolutistic era in the France of the 17th and 18th centuries. Things did not come off completely according to plan. The royal villa of Linderhof turned out a good deal smaller and less imposing, but was still built in accordance with the traditions of Versailles. Thus, Linderhof takes on a more private character. To be sure, it is the smallest of the three castles, but it is also perhaps the most luxurious as well. It is the only one Ludwig saw completed, and he resided here long and often. In this castle, Ludwig sensed a close connection to the Bourbon kings, which is why we find one reference after another to Louis XIV, Ludwig's royal inspiration. Linderhof was not intended as a lavish display, but rather as a place of retreat for Ludwig. He hoped to relive the dream of the past as an everyday event here. The young king of Bavaria also greatly admired life at the court of Louis XV, which is why he hung portraits of such court lords and ladies of Versailles as Madame de Pompadour, Madame du Barry, and Duke Maurice of Saxony. And there are many other paintings illustrating many varied aspects of court life in Versailles. Despite the intimate character of Linderhof, Ludwig II was never entirely without some of the splendor of court ceremony, clearly indicating his profound attachment to the ideals of absolute monarchy, as we can see in this throned audience chamber. The central point of Versailles is the king's bedchamber, and Ludwig adhered to this emphasis in Linderhof as well, which is why the bedchamber is the largest room in the castle. The frequent appearance of pictures illustrating the ceremonies of lever and coucher, and the receptions attached to the dressing and undressing of the kings, is easy to understand when we know something of Ludwig's thought. In the middle of the dining room, we find the famous magic table, set with genuine Meissen porcelain tableware. This many-armed candelabra was also crafted of Meissen porcelain. It hangs in the Hall of Mirrors, certainly the most ornate room in Linderhof Castle. Beside the many marble groups, we find any number of peacock depictions in the various royal castles. This bird was one of Ludwig's favorite animals. Beside the Venus Grotto, there are other buildings in the Linderhof Gardens, such as this Moorish kiosk. One of Ludwig's ideals was the glory that had been Byzantium. He never did realize his plan of a mammoth Byzantine palace, but a number of Oriental themes appear within the framework of existing possibilities at the time. We find a companion piece to the Moorish kiosk in the hunting lodge on the peak of Schachen Mountain. A Moorish hall in the second floor with heavy carpets, incense bowls, colorful ostrich feathers, fountains, and candelabra. All this in a mountain lodge almost 5,000 feet above sea level. A world of dreams nestled in the majesty of nature. Ludwig felt a deep closeness to nature from his early childhood on. He was particularly fond of Bavaria's splendid mountains and lakes. He looked high and low for sites where he could realize his noble goals. He purchased the island of Herrenchiemsee to save it from the clutches of lumber speculators. And here he finally found a piece of land which would permit him to make his most ambitious dream come true, the full-size reproduction of Versailles Castle. Here he hoped to build a temple of glory where he could pay reverence to the memory of Louis XIV, the Sun King. Herrenchiemsee Castle was Ludwig II's most impressive structure, representing his admiration and idealization of the Bourbon kings and the absolutism they personified. All the splendor of this castle is evident in the staircase in the south wing. This is a copy of the legendary ambassador's staircase in Versailles. Only the glass roof with its functional iron construction is a reinterpretation, enriching the colors through the use of light and clearly setting off the glory of the ornamentation. The staircase leads to the so-called Hall of the Bodyguards, where the halberds of the Royal Bavarian Guards stand in a row. The first anteroom is dominated by a huge cupboard meant to contain musical instruments. The paintings in all these rooms are illustrations of scenes from the court and the wars of the Sun King. Louis XIV also dominates the public rooms of the castle. As in Linderhof, the Herrenchiemsee bedchamber is the central room, in the spirit of the absolute French monarchy. Beside the bedchamber, as in the state apartments of Versailles, is the council chamber. The order of this room is clearly drawn from spatial concepts used in the design of Baroque castles. Two square corner halls, here the Hall of Peace, enclose the most impressive room in Herrenchiemsee Castle. grand gallery of mirrors. Over 300 feet long, 1,800 candles illuminated this hall during Ludwig's infrequent but always nocturnal visits. After the gallery of mirrors, the so-called private section of the castle begins. Here, tribute is paid to the Bourbon king, Louis XV, the bedchamber. The king's study, also called the room of clocks. The Blue Salon, with its almost entirely mirrored walls and inlaid flooring. The oval porcelain cabinet containing an incomparable wealth of chinaware. Finally, a small gallery which serves as the final room of the private section. Herrenchiemsee Castle, a dream that never quite came true. Ludwig's mysterious death in the year 1886 put an end to his ideas. But the constructions, Herrenchiemsee, Linderhof, Neuschwanstein, have remained. To bear witness to the power and strength of man's imagination.